6:02, 6:03 on January 25th, and I'll call the meeting to order. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing?
Joan Cutler, a motion to open the public hearing.
All right, can I have a second?
I'll second it.
Martin Hahn, second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And
Paula,
Martin
aye.
Hahn,
I'm trying to
Martin
look
Hahn, aye.
behind you guys to see the other board members, so don't take
Joan.
offense.
Joan, aye. Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're here today to talk about the private well pending regulation. I'd like to give you a little background on the regulation. We'll give board members the first option to make comments. I will then read the written issues that came in, and then we'll open the floor for public comment. I would ask that we keep repetition to a minimum. If somebody has said something eloquently, there's no need to repeat it. We got it the first time. Okay, we can all get home before breakfast. All right. The regulations in Manchester were last adopted in 1989, 1990. There's been a lot of changes since then, and we have been taking them one at a time to update them. We've already completed 3. This is the 4th. We have spoken with or had consulting with the DEP on what the regulations should look like. They've made their suggestions on what they thought would be appropriate, and then we have the option to make the regulation, the state regulation, more rigorous, but not less. If that makes sense. Okay. What we did was we took the standing protocol that's been for 34 years, which is you provide this data to the Board of Health. One issue that you provide is a water quality test prior to opening your well. In the past, what happens is if the results are higher than the state standard, we would ask the applicant to come back with some method of bringing the water quality within the state standard. It's the same thing we do with septic, same approach. That's been the way it's been handled for years. We want to continue that practice. Why we wanted to give some of the potential consequences in writing is that we want to document for transparency and to make sure that everyone's feel they're treated fairly, because there are different levels of testing required depending on the factors that may come up. And I don't want anyone to feel that, why should I test in 5 years when they're only testing in 10 years? So it'll be there. That was the intent of putting it in the document rather than having it come up when you come to the Board of Health for your permit. We have not had a system in place in the past. State law requires that if you decommission a well, that there's a process that goes through. That has not been tracked here. We have no idea what wells are still active and what wells are decommissioned. We have made some proposals. The concept was to ask all current well owners to submit a current water quality test in 2024. And if you don't have one, to have a test at which point we would sit down with the applicant and discuss the options that would take effect in 2025. So 2024 was basically to get benchmark what wells are still in operation, what ones have been decommissioned. The records from the state are really not dependable. So, and we now have or will have this spring, a computer system that will show on a map every septic and every private well and all of the status and backup data. It's a matter of just clicking the dot on the map. So we'll be able to track the status, what's going on, much easier than trying to go through draws of paper. The meeting here is to discuss some issues. I would tell you that some of the issues are misinformation. The requirement on decontamination has not changed for 34 years. When you put a new well in place, you have to decontaminate it to prevent exterior contamination. It's been that way since 1989. That hasn't changed. There was some concern that there was repeated chlorination required. That's not true. So that's off the table. There are other issues that are suppositions that some of our regulations were dependent on water sources. Were the recharge water sources connected, not connected? We never took that into consideration. We have no idea. I'm not aware of anyone in town that has any idea. And to find out the location of all of the aquifers and the water sources is extremely expensive, and really you have to question why you would need to do that. And there's other things that need the money, need to be funded. So none of this requirement is based on supposition or theory about the status, location, connection or disconnection of underground water sources. So those two things I like to say up front. If those were issues for you, change your speech, because they weren't really considered, and we should. Now I have to read into the record. Try to stay awake, folks. All of the written complaints. I'll try to do it quickly.
We can help out.
All right. Number one, October 16th, 2023. Dear Board of Health, I recently learned of an initiative to increase regulations of private wells in Manchester and appreciate the opportunity to share some opinions and pose questions. Reading the draft regulation made me wonder, what's this like? Which made me think about health and safety regulations that require inspections. The only mandatory annual inspection I can think of is for vehicles. I won't comment. The only real estate related inspections I can think of occur when papers are passed during a real estate transaction, except for some permits that require site visits, annual requirement that makes sense as part of a real estate transaction. It does seem reasonable that renters should be able to learn the health status of where they're living, but this strikes me as a regulation that should be at the state rather than municipal level. I would like to comment on that. This is a misunderstanding about the state's, how the state operates. The Board of Health, the Department of Public Health is charged with enforcing health law. They don't have the resources to enforce it in every municipality in the state. So we, Board of Health, reports to the Department of Public Health. Since we report to them, we are deputized to enforce the state regulations. So nobody from the state, unless you really make a pain of yourself, are gonna come down and try to enforce these regulations. What they will tell you is the board, you need to enforce, you need to adopt the regulation and you need to enforce it. So that clarifies the state participation. And as far as the annual inspections, every single restaurant is inspected twice a year. Every single food establishment that is inspected twice a year. Camps, pools, clubs, all inspected. So please understand that some of these comments are without understanding of what's going on. As part of developing an updated regulation, we'd like to volunteer as a reference. We have an existing well used for irrigation, and we'd like to experience the process and costs for testing. If you would reply with the recommended testing facility along with details of what tests should be performed, we'll have our well tested to get a sense of what the annual expense would be. But also like to propose our property as a litmus test for a new well. We live on the east end of Manchester, approximately 2 miles from Lincoln Street. The Lincoln Street well on a 17-acre parcel, and we'd like to confirm the updated regulations. Regulations twice. Confirm updated regulation is so prohibitive as to deny an additional well. It would practically prohibit additional wells in the town. Would that be a bad thing, you might ask? One answer is that it depends on how long it takes the town to remediate existing PFA levels and ability to continue providing safe drinking water as the town works through the challenges of increasing house density. Two other concerns occur to me that I am somewhat reluctant to poke at. First, if the town water system is injecting PFAS into people's homes, what, if anything, is the impact on septic systems? Second, if the Lincoln Street well is the source of the PFAS, where is it coming from, and are there additional health and safety issues surrounding the school district? Thank you for your consideration. Stephen Kelly, 355 Summer Street. There's only 7 of these. Number 2, you don't get an email often from.
Well, that's just a message. Do you want me to read this one?
Oh, I am the owner and trustee of and resident at 1 University Lane in Manchester, and I am writing to comment on draft regulations that are currently under consideration by the Board of Health. We installed an artesian well in circa 1980 for the purpose of installing landscaping, planting trees, and generally upgrading portions of our property. That well was successfully completed, registered through the Commonwealth, and its water quality has been tested annually to ensure it meets state potable water standards. The quality and quantity of this product has allowed us to utilize it for drinking. We established with the aid of consultants that our aquifer stands separate from the town's resources and beyond our property. The water flows directly into our marsh and ultimately into Kettle Cove, draining primarily through the sands at Black Beach. During the 40-plus years since installation, we have continued to enjoy adding to and maintaining the landscaping. During the past droughts, when the town has limited irrigation upon request, we have been informed by the Selectman's Office that private wells could continue to irrigate and were requested to erect a sign as to the water source. We have upgraded the well head and pump from time to time. The additional work occasioned by our increased well capacity and flow. All work completed by contractors certified to provide the services in connection with drinking water sources. The draft regulations that are currently do state that private well owners are required to comply with the same conservation efforts towards homes and properties on public water supplies, especially with regard to drought restrictions. If there is a water ban for irrigation, it also applies to well owners. By this letter, I suggest the Board of Health this language to grandfather existing wells from future water bans as of the regulations effective date that meet drinking water standards set by the Commonwealth. Well quality would be certified by annual testing. We believe that including property owners and future limits to the town water supply would result in manifest injustice to ourselves and similarly to others. Thank you for the consideration, for considering this request to the forthcoming regulations. Stephen G. Castanet.
Want me to read the next one?
Oh,
Give your voice a chance.
Yeah,
That's-
Mark Wall.
that's him again. You want to go to number
No,
3?
one more, turn the
Yeah.
page again.
Okay. This is from Mark Well, 15 School Street, Manchester. Dear Ms. Lupkin, please accept these written comments relative to the above referenced matter. Specifically, I request the board strongly consider amending the following provisions of the draft regulations with respect to private irrigation wells. Quote, private well owners are required to comply with the same conservation efforts as homes and properties on public water supplies, especially with regard to drought restrictions. If there is a water ban for irrigation, it also applies to well owners. Pre-existing private wells should be exempt from public water ban restrictions in part based on the following. It has been demonstrated that water supplied by these private wells is largely from sources unrelated to our public water supply aquifer. The owners of such wells have made very significant investments in landscaping that is serviced by such wells and which is critically dependent on water supplied by the wells for survival, especially during drought conditions. In addition to having great aesthetic value, the landscaping serviced by such wells benefits the entire community with respect to such matters as drainage control, sustainability and growth of various wildlife species populations, reduction of impervious surfaces, and the overall ecological health and sustainability of our environment. It is entirely possible that the creation of such wells in the future may provide the same benefits, providing that the sourcing is for the most part independent from that of the public water supply, which can reasonably be determined by qualified experts prior to project execution. While I do not have any private well water supply sources on my own property, I strongly support the changes I have outlined above for those that do. Yours truly, Mark Well. Nolan, you want to read the next one?
Well, 3 of them are from the same writer who Wendy had some emails with, so maybe you want to do Mr. Beatty's, and I'm just going to interrupt to say that Alan Wilson is here, who submitted a letter. Do you want to reference your letter? Do you want me to read your letter into the record?
I'd like to include it in the record. I don't
Yeah.
think it's necessary to read it.
Okay.
I can summarize it.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, is that acceptable?
Starting from, I'm actually going to read the summary from Mr. Beatty. This is Robert Beatty from 15 Loading Place Road. Wendy and Ellen, as I told Wendy earlier today, I'm unable to attend this evening's public hearing because of my prior obligation. as a member of the Manchester Board of Assessors to attend this evening's public meeting of that board, which is scheduled for 5:30 to 7 p.m. Accordingly, I am sending you this email thread that sets out my comments and concerns about Sections 8, Water Quality Testing Requirements, Part 5A and 6, and Section 9, Well Construction Requirements, Part 4F. I ask that this entire email thread be presented to the members of the Board of Health and made a part of the public record for this evening's public hearing. My concluding comments, concerns, and requests. First, if the Board of Health is in a hurry to implement the regulations affecting drillers and new wells rather than those parts impacting existing wells, I request that the board promulgate the regulations with the current text in Section 7, Part 5A and 6, deleted and replaced with the following: reserved for future use. That would allow the board to obtain actual test results from at least one private water well in each of the parts of town where there are concentrations of existing wells, so the board would have actionable empirical data rather than acting on the gross averages of the CDC's 30,000-foot generalized conclusions, which contain no actionable data applicable to Manchester by the Sea, Cape Ann, or the Essex County portions of the North Shore for that matter. I have read the underlying USGS study referenced in the CDC paper, Quality of Water for Domestic Wells and Principal Aquifers of the United States, 1991 to 2004, available for download. If anybody would like any of the link information, they're all linked in here. I'm happy to forward it to you or give it to you after the meeting. And there is no locally actionable data in that study either. The USGS study only mentions Massachusetts 3 times, once in a photo caption on page 3, once with respect to Massachusetts regulations on radon levels on page 19, and once on page 58 as part of the agency address. There is no mention of well water quality conditions in MBTS, Cape Ann, or the North Shore. Putting the proposed regulations in Section 7, Parts 5A and 6 on hold would allow the board to follow with the Mass EPA private well guidelines. Bullet. The Model Board of Health Regulations for private wells provides general guidance because subsurface geology varies considerably across the Commonwealth, page 1. Chapter 111, Section 31 of the Massachusetts General Laws grants local boards of health broad authority to make reasonable health regulation. Boards of health are encouraged to adopt locally appropriate well regulation, which take into consideration local geology, land uses, and zoning regulations. It is the duty of the local Board of Health to monitor local conditions and create necessary regulation which address those conditions in order to protect public health. Thus, the Manchester Board of Health was to monitor local conditions, i.e. gather empirical facts about local private well water quality, so as to be able to draft regulations that address local well water conditions. First, monitor local conditions. Second, gather local data. Third, regulate local well water conditions based on the local information gathered. Instead, the board is doing it in reverse order, regulating to actionable obtain data. Or, as one of my neighbors more succinctly put it, the Board of Health, the BOH, it appears, is putting the regulatory cart before the investigatory cart. Precisely so. Accordingly, I request that the board hold in abeyance proposed regulations Section 7, Part 5A and 6, pending the board obtaining actionable empirical data about actual water quality conditions from private water wells located in MBTS. Second, concerning Section 9(4)F and the regulations ambiguity as whether all wells must have chlorination equipment and all well water must be chlorinated, at least 2 well-educated, reasonable persons, Mr. Fetterspiel and myself, have interpreted the regulations as requiring that all wells be equipped with a chlorination system and that all well water be chlorinated. It is entirely possible that other Manchester residents might also interpret the regulation that way. Given the ambiguity in the regulations, the board's current refusal to include a formal clarification to the regulations, like the one I proposed, is disconcerting because a future board might have a different interpretation, and that future board would not be legally bound by the present board's interpretation. The proposed clarification would do nothing to limit homeowners' choice of remediation, nor would it do anything to discourage homeowners from being informed about best practices. Instead, the proposed clarification would merely remedy an ambiguity and make it clear that the regulations do not require all wells to be equipped with a chlorination system capable of delivering water into the water lines chlorinated to an initial concentration between 50 milligrams per liter and 100 milligrams per liter. The proposed clarification would have no effect on any individual homeowner's choice of remediation, a word that clearly conveys the well's water is not in compliance with the water quality parameters. Nor would it have any impact on the board's enforcement authority under Regulation Section 9 to order any well owner whose well water did not meet the water quality parameters to chlorinate the water, or the ability of any such homeowner to propose chlorination pursuant to Regulation Section 7(1). Accordingly, I renew my request that the board add clarification, making it expressly understood that the regulation do not require I, all wells to be equipped with chlorination system, or II, all well water be chlorinated. I thank the members of the Board of Health for considering my comments, concerns, and requests. Respectfully submitted, Rob Beatty. There are 4 more pages of my back and forth with him. I'm happy to read it into the record, or he did summarize all the things we talked about. I think it would be, if anybody wants a copy, it is available. It is all here. Happy to forward it to you through email or give it to you after the meeting. Is that good?
Yeah. Alan, sir, would you like us to read it or something, or would you like to summarize it?
I'll read a couple of paragraphs of it, and then I'll summarize the rest. I'm Alan Wilson. I first outlined my qualifications, which I thought the board might not be familiar with. I'll just state those briefly. I'm a retired environmental lawyer. For most of my career, I practiced with the Conservation Law Foundation as a senior attorney and as vice president. My specialties were in administrative law and appellate litigation before both federal and state agencies. I've appeared in cases before the U.S. District Court, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit, and the U.S. Supreme Court. I also have volunteered in a number of capacities with environmental organizations, including Mass Audubon, where I was a board member for 17 years, and chair for 6, National Audubon Society for 12 years, and I was also a member of the Manchester Conservation Commission. I have a well that I use exclusively for irrigation, installed in 2017 after the drought in 2016. As you all know, I think Section 6, Paragraph 7 of the regulations provides that private well owners are required to comply with the same conservation efforts as homes and properties on public water supply, especially with regard to drought restrictions. If there's a water ban for irrigation, and I'm quoting, it also applies to well owners. Contrary to the chair's statement at the beginning of this meeting, it is not true that no one knows where our groundwater comes from. The town's water resource consultant in 1990 did an extensive study of our groundwater. And he has also advised the Water Resource Protection Task Force in its work over the last 2 years. And he said in a letter dated October 3rd, 2023, Scott Horsley to Steve Gang, the chair of the Water Resource Protection Task Force, private irrigation wells that are not located within the Gravelly Pond watershed or in close proximity to the Wheaton Street well and within the Zone 2 area will not interfere or compete with the public water supply sources. They will draw groundwater from a separate and distinct groundwater source. So these regulations as drafted are contrary to the town's own hydrogeologist expert opinion. They are irrational in that respect, and arbitrary and capricious, and I don't think they would survive a judicial challenge. There are other aspects of the regulations that I think are also unfounded, and they're detailed in my letter. So I would encourage the board to take another look and come up with reasonable regulations for irrigation wells.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Leah pointed out that I did not read one of the pieces out of Mr. Beatty's was suggested language for, he wanted us to include a new section, section 813, that would read as follows. Notwithstanding anything to the contrary in these regulations, nothing in these regulations requires an owner of a private drinking water well to install any chlorination system or to cause such well water to be chlorinated prior to human use or consumption. I apologize for the interruption and going back to chlorination, but thank you, Leah, for telling me that I missed that important piece. Sorry, back to Mr. Wilson's.
You know what? I was done, but I will add that to a large extent, almost entirely, the draft regulations that the Board of Health has proposed are based on model regulations developed by Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. But in the preamble to the model regulations, DEP says specifically that in putting the model to work, local boards of health should change them as necessary to reflect local conditions. The board, unfortunately, has not done that. These regulations do not reflect the specific scientifically documented hydrogeology in the town.
Do we have another one? We haven't, who was
That's
next?
all of the written.
No, there was John Spy Rock Hill.
That's
That's me.
Alan. That's
Oh, that was you, okay.
Done.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Everybody great.
All right. And any board member? Let's start with those
Yes,
on.
Martin here. Can you hear me, Martin?
Yes,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yeah, I have a few comments to make. While I appreciate all the input and criticism and suggestions by all these letters, the comments and criticism make it clear to me that there's erroneously kind of a opinion that this is about public water supply versus private wells. It is not. Okay, this is a shared resource. Stewardship of that shared resource is important. And while we have some statements from experts that say that some of the wells or most of the wells or whoever is not connected to the town public water resources, I would, number one, challenge well owners. Let's say there's a spill near, let's say, 128. We recently learned that there's some aquifers near 128 that feed into the public water supply. But there's also well owners like along Loading Place Road, for example. Would they feel comfortable if they're, half a mile outside of zone 2 after a spill? Would they feel comfortable not testing their well and thinking that is far enough from contamination? So that's just food for thought, because it's not just about public water versus well water. For example, the University Lane or Spy Rock Hill irrigation wells that were quoted by the letters, if they continue to irrigate during drought conditions, adjacent well owners that may just use their wells for drinking water, their water table will drop because they share that resource underneath the ground. It's not that one well is like an insular pocket of water underneath that property. It's not that they don't own that water. The adjacent well owners in different parcels surrounding it have a right to their water from their wells just as well. So if somebody irrigates a lot, the well water from adjacent properties may drop and be impacted. So that's one thing you need to consider. It's not about the comparison to public water supply all the time. The second issue I want to bring up is if you don't test the irrigated well water, you're bringing groundwater up to the surface. And if that is contaminated with, organic solvents or arsenic or lead, some of these are naturally occurring, and you bring that onto the surface and it percolates into the surrounding areas, then the surrounding well water or owners will be impacted by that water trickling into their well supply. So it's not, you can't see each well as isolated and the ownership restricted to that owner, and it's a shared resource. So I'm really somewhat flabbergasted by that opinion that, I drilled that well, I spent all that money, and it's my water and I can do what I want with it. No, it's not. We are in an area with a lot of ledge, and the water underground is more connected than we think. We've learned that with the recent Water Task Force report, and we'll continue to learn about it. We don't know where wells draw their water from exactly. Nobody that we know of, even though they state they've done so, have done extensive hydrogeological surveys that extend out far enough. Remember, the watershed in Zone 3 can be far away from the actual surface water or from the well. The secondary recharge area, that's how it's called, can be fairly large and overlap with the watershed for public water supply and for other well owners. So don't view this as such isolation. It's really more a regulation to collect data, early warning system for adjacent well owners, for the public water supply, for all well owners, that we want these wells to be tested, and restrict that water tables drop with too much irrigation. I don't know if you saw the Boston Globe article this morning. Actually, this was a long study published in Nature about thousands of aquifers, not specifically Massachusetts, but that the water tables have been dropping over this period of time when they studied these. The last thing I want to say before I turn it back over to you guys is there's a study also published in the Boston Globe, I want to see last year in October, about, I forget the exact quote, but Ellen can mention it. It's 500-something wells that were tested in Massachusetts, and a third were contaminated. And the owners did not know that. And that's another reason to consider universal mandatory well testing, according to the guidelines that the state has published for many, many years, and that CDC and EPA have recommended for decades. That's all I want to say.
Paula, do you have anything you'd like to say? Paul?
Well, I just would like to say that we started with the DEP template because the current well regulations that we had are 30 years old. And this is a work in process. We welcome all of your opinions and criticisms and ideas. And this is a regulation that has to be molded for our community with community support and community input. That's why we're having this public hearing. That's why we're going to work on these regulations until they are suitable for our community. The DEP regulation was a starting point. That's all.
Thank you.
And this is Martin Hahn again. When we did modify those guidelines, by the way, the DEP guidelines that we looked at, they are modified. We didn't just take them as is. So if you look at the details with regard to testing and including irrigation wells and those kind of things, we did modify them. Thank you.
I was just going to echo what Paula said, and that we will take all the suggestions that people have taken the time to alert us to, and try and incorporate them and make this as applicable to our town, which is clearly different from others in Massachusetts. So, and thank you for all coming.
I agree with the previous statements, and I think, the regulations weren't designed to be punitive by any means. We are concerned about the water people are ingesting in their homes. especially where, like Martin said, 32% of wells that were tested in Massachusetts were contaminated, and people did not know that, and were putting the water into their homes.
I would like to make a personal comment. I believe that the Board of Health has authority over the quality of the water. I would like to see some more information on, I question whether we have any authority over the volume of water that is used, which would mean we have no input on drought conditions. It's up to the select board, the DPW, whoever else wants to take that baggage. I'd like to personally look into that myself. I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think that we necessarily can dictate. We can recommend that you follow the state, the town's wishes, but I don't think we can require it. But I'd like to explore that further personally.
Well, this is Martin again. I would say that as part of our mandate for Board of Health, for Public Health, is to secure an adequate supply, not just qualitatively, but also quantitatively of drinking water. So I do think we have some authority, maybe not exclusive authority, but some authority over that as well.
Okay, the board members, are you all satisfied with
Yes.
your comments?
Did you want to say something?
No, I was just actually going to note the time, and I have a concern because we will be losing one of our board members in about 10 minutes,
Right,
and the public is here to comment, so.
so.
Actually, me, myself as well, I'm running out of battery here.
All right, so we'll take public comment. Our intent is to digest what you said, no pun intended, digest what you say, and come back with, we want to understand it and see how things can be adjusted so that everybody is comfortable with them. So, again, please, if the person before you states an issue, you really don't need to repeat it, so that we can move this along. Gentleman in the back.
Yes, Brian Solis, member select board. Just want to let the board know and the public know that board chair Ann Harrison moved that the select board recommend to the Board of Health that they defer the regulations on wells for a year while they gather more information, perform public education, and identify which wells can be used during droughts. Mr. Round seconded that motion and was unanimously approved by roll call vote of 5-0.
I would remind you that the state law prohibits you from interfering, or you can, as an individual, you can certainly comment that as an elected or appointed official in the town, it is improper for you to make any comments on the policy.
We just told you what the select board voted on.
Could you tell me the date of the select board meeting? I'm sorry, I missed
It
that.
was January 16th.
Okay, so that was a board vote, and that's you're announcing that as the official. Okay, great. So, yep,
Perfectly legit.
yes.
I'm Leslie Beatty, and a couple things that have been said. One was, and I'm sorry, I don't know your names. One was the fact that if there is mandatory testing, it will be punitive because it will cost quite a bit of money for people who don't necessarily have that. Second, I agree with you, sir, about the fact that things should be recommended, not required. And the third thing is that my husband, Wendy, you read some, there is some ambiguity in the regulations as they stand right now, and those need to be clarified without any kind of confusion, without any kind of misunderstandings before you go further. Thank you.
I believe you.
Yeah, the first thing I'd like to say is
Sorry, you didn't mean
Paul Stone, 15 Crooked Lane. The first thing you said was you were concerned about pools and these other things, right?
No, I'm just pointing out that those are annually inspected. I was not
Okay.
concerned about them.
But what I'm saying is that when we have a private well, we're not disseminating water to the public. So this isn't like a victualer's license, and it's not a liquor license or anything like that. This is water that's consumed on our property. In my case, it's 2 people, right? So it's not going anywhere. The second thing that I'd like to say is that you brought up this point that a third of the wells in Massachusetts are contaminated.
A third of the ones they tested.
Okay,
were
well,
just
first of all-
502.
First of all, I have a map here that my son did. My son's a geotechnical engineer, and he also has a geotechnical license in California. He's a civil engineer. So he did this, and it shows all the different depths of your wells, right? So you said a third of the wells,
Of the
right?
ones that they tested.
Okay.
They just tested like 502 of them.
Okay.
So obviously it's not in Massachusetts, so it's a random sample of 502.
Yeah, so in Manchester, we've never had any heavy industry here, right? Like our harbor, we know, doesn't have any pollutants in it, right? So those things that you're saying do not apply to this town.
Martin Hahn here, I object because we did have tanneries, we did have all kinds of things. There's lots of stuff in the soil that can potentially, from a natural source, contaminate the water. And we're not talking about acute toxicity here and acute illnesses. We're talking about long-term effects. We're talking about chronic environmental exposure from toxins that are introduced into the water, PFAS only being one of them. So there's many issues that I think are being misunderstood here.
Okay, I got one more thing to say. The next thing is that you talked about the potential of wells going dry, and like
Right.
everyone shares their well, and there's a potential for that to happen. Has that ever happened here? I've
didn't
never
make that
heard a
statement,
complaint
so I
of
don't know.
anyone's well ever going dry. So I don't think there's a
And I
problem.
did not say, this is Martin again, I did not say the wells are going dry. I said the water table will drop if there is adjacent wells and one or several people irrigate during drought conditions, then inevitably what's it called, the capacity of the surrounding wells will be somewhat diminished. And we all have heard that droughts are getting more severe and more problematic. And to preempt that, keeping tabs on these kind of things is not a bad thing. Why do we have to be reactive rather than proactive?
Let this gentleman here first.
David Page, 11 University Lane. You guys might be familiar. I just drilled a well 6 months ago. Spent tens of thousands of dollars drilling that well. I drilled it for one and only one reason. It's an irrigation well. And it's for, in the last drought, which was 2 years ago, my wife and I spent, because we had the water ban, my wife and I spent like an hour to 2 hours a day trying to keep our 30-year rhododendrons and other ornamental plants alive. And we didn't want to have to face that again. So we drilled this well, and if you now restrict it, okay, essentially we spend tens of thousands of dollars for nothing, and that would be considered to be a taking, I think. And I think we would expect to be reimbursed by the town. That's number one. Number two, the private well guidelines published by the state, which you guys copied a lot of in this document, okay, specifically states that the Board of Health has authority to adopt reasonable regulations, health regulations. And so one of the things that you guys have done is you've tied drinking water to irrigation water to agricultural water together, and you've applied all the regulations to all different uses. Okay? Those uses should be separated. So now you have this list of what is for drinking water private well contamination. If you guys have seen it, our report says that we have elevated salt and elevated iron. Okay? So I don't know whether that would be considered to be contamination, but it's fine for our plants and doesn't disturb anybody else because our water ends up going back down in. We don't overwater, obviously, because it costs money. We don't overwater, and the water goes back down through our property, through our land. And theoretically, a portion of it goes back into where we pumped it out of. I've spoken at quite some length with one of the heads of the Water Resource Resources Protection Task Force, and I don't know whether you guys have read that document, but according to the Water Resources Protection Task Force, Manchester has an overabundance of water, far more than we need, even in a drought situation. The reason why there's a water ban has nothing to do with the availability of groundwater. The reason for the water ban is because our system has a capacity restriction, and when you have a drought, the demand on the system basically makes it unable to supply everybody all the time, so they have to cut out the irrigation. That's why those water bans exist. So it's very important to understand and differentiate between water availability, water usage, and the purpose for that water usage. Let me see, what else do I want to say here? We already talked about chlorination, splitting. Yeah, and so the last thing is Mr. Hahn made statements about drawing down the amount of water, and I said what I understood from the Water Resources Protection Board, but the examples that were being used by Mr. Hahn, which are national examples of drawing down aquifers, okay, are far different situations than a local usage of water for watering gardens and plants. They're talking about agriculture use, which is a massive use of water, and in the West or in Texas. Let me see. Oh, and the last thing is where bacteria can contaminate a well, potentially if it's not sealed on a regular basis. It is unlikely that the characteristics of a well, a granite well, which is what all of us have here, are going to change year to year to year, or even over 10 years. If you have iron contamination, you're going to have iron contamination, and it's not likely to change. If you don't have uranium, you're not going to have uranium in your water. The state has stated, has a list of the towns that might be affected by arsenic and uranium. Manchester's not on that list, and there is no adjacent town that is on that list. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
There was somebody,
I'm George Rollins from Rollins Well Drilling. Probably drilled most of the wells here in Manchester. And I can't quote all these studies, but I can tell you that in over 50 years of drilling them and in the field every day, the droughts of 01, 02, 2016, I have never seen the bedrock aquifer change whatsoever. Surface do, based on rainfall and warm weather and so forth. And to Mr. Hahn's comments about drawing down on the neighbor's well, we drill closed-loop geothermal wells on a regular basis, sometimes 8 or 10 wells on one property, 20 feet apart in a grid, and never been connected, 10 of them, not connected to each other, in different flows on every single one. So one neighbor using water does not mean that he's drawing from the other neighbor's well. We haven't seen it. In all my years, I haven't seen that happen. So can't quote all these studies, but I can tell you what I see every day in the field. So.
thank you.
This is Martin Hahn. I have a question on your geothermal well. They don't really draw a lot of water, and the water recirculates, so that wouldn't really become apparent right away. And you're not really losing water out of that well,
All right,
because it's a loop.
okay. I believe,
I was gonna say, like, sort of a point of order.
No, but
Did we
the water
lose,
that we,
Paula,
get when we
and
drilled it.
if we could stop doing the interim conversations, it might help get these people. We have about 20 people in this room at least to get through comments. So I don't know if,
well, I think what I've heard from the little comments and so far is a concern about restricting the volume of water that can be used. I agree that,
No, that's not true.
well, you're talking about the drought and restriction of drought.
No, but we have more to say. I'd like to talk about the testing.
Well, let me just
Okay,
All right, summarize that one point.
okay.
And I assure you, we're gonna investigate that more thoroughly. Personally, I have similar questions about whether that has anything to do with the Board of Health or not. So that will be investigated. Anyone who has had those comments, that will be definitely investigated. We will look into all of your comments. But that one seems to be a number of people that were concerned about that. So I wanted to put that one to rest. So you don't have to comment again because we heard you. And
I think we should find out how many more people want to talk,
Well,
because we'll.
he just,
I just wanted to clarify the last comment by, is it Dr. Hahn or Mr. Hahn?
No, go ahead.
On those closed loop systems, they're not withdrawing water from the well, but when we drill them, we hit water and we know how much we hit. And they're different on all those wells, where we hit it, how much we hit. But on a closed loop geothermal system, you're not removing any water, you're just circulating through a loop, just to clarify that.
Right, that's what I meant. You circulate the water, you don't really lose water out of that.
The point was the non-connectivity.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah. Your point was they're not connected.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So we've had a well for 26 years, right? We've had 3 water systems. Right now, we have a brand-new water system that was put in by H2O Care. There's a person here that works with them, right? And I don't understand why we have the well inspected and serviced by a professional company, licensed professional company every year, right? I don't understand why we can't just have a certificate that's provided to us by my company that says my water is safe.
yeah,
You
that's
can.
fine,
Well,
you can.
Yeah, but what you're saying in your regulations is that we have to pay for all these tests.
In a year, is it yearly or every 10 years?
It depends.
Well,
In this case, I believe it would be every 10 years. But the but is, if you're already doing that, you're fine. Just send it into the Board of Health.
Yeah, but you want a lot more than this PFAS test, that's
No.
very
So,
expensive.
just so
No,
people
that's
are,
every 10 years.
can I clarify the testing, just for people's understanding? There is a short set that is annual. It includes things like total coliform, it includes nitrates and nitrates and nitrites. I believe like sodium is in it, it's a list. Iron, pH, no, that's the
And
wrong
you want
list.
that yearly?
No, that's the wrong list.
Initially, you want all these things done now.
So that's the annual
Not-
test,
If
and
you've got
then,
something you did last year, that's fine.
No, I haven't.
and then the PFAS and the heavy metals, arsenic, goes right on, that is a 10-year interval.
Okay,
So,
But we have to do all these tests right now.
as a baseline.
so like Peter said, our intent is to work into this, and our start is going to be an education plan. So if people have existing testing, they can send it in to us. We get a chance to look at it. Oh, this is what's usually tested. This is what the H2O company professionals say is the best use. It is going to be a learning experience for all of us. It is not meant to, as of, February 1st, everybody's gonna get a well test. That's not at all what we're doing. We would overwhelm the labs. That's not, we would overwhelm you. You're right, that's a large amount of testing all at once. I think the concept is we were trying to get information in from people from a baseline, people understanding this is what we have, we've adopted it. And I think the board has said every meeting that it is intended to be, people can come to the board and talk and have a conversation about it. And I understand some of the other comments, but that was our
And I would be shocked if you'd be required to do any more than you're already doing. I haven't seen the report, so please give me that leeway. But if you're already doing it, and we just need a record of it, that's all.
I just think these regulations are excessive. I talked to the guy that does our well, and he said the only town in this area that does anything requiring testing is Middleton, and that's when the properties are sold. This is just what I know, right? And they've had problems over there because they've had dumps and everything else. We don't have anything like that here. So we're going into, we're putting in the most aggressive regulations in this area. And I don't understand why you're doing it, right? I don't think it's right, and I don't think that it's right that you collect that data because no one else is doing that. And you're compelling us to give you this data.
This is Martin Hahn.
Thank you for that comment.
The Mass DEP, the Mass DEP has, for many, many years, and the CDC and the EPA have had those exact same panels recommended for annual and for every 10 years. There's nothing new about those, just that they were recommended, and they actually write in their guidelines that every well owner is responsible to provide safe water to whoever uses the wells. So this is not anything new. It's just not a mandatory required regulation. So we didn't change any of that. The fact that we bundled the water from irrigation, agricultural, and drinking has to do with the fact that, we don't have any control of how the water is used once the well is there. Agricultural water will end up in the food that's potentially produced on that land. The water will percolate, and even though you say these are all isolated pockets of water, I have a tough time believing that with that large watershed that we have here, with the ledge underneath, that there's zero interaction and communication and exchange. Otherwise, none of these wells will have PFAS in them, because you're claiming they're all kind of isolated and pockets on their own that are not influenced by others. That doesn't make sense, because where would all these other contaminants come from that are in the water?
But I think the gentleman, did you have a comment, sir? Yes.
Me back here?
Yeah.
I have some comments, yes. Paul Murray, 14 Loading Place Road. I'm more, and I apologize if this was already said, but I'm just curious, like, how the board started this process. Like, where did this begin? The gestation of this entire thing. Like, what brought it on? Did somebody come down and complain, or said, why aren't we doing anything with the wells? Like, what is the motivation for this?
We have a list of regulations, and we are just going down the list, looking at them in order to determine which ones might need updating. So, and there's a big focus on water right now in the town, so it made sense to perhaps look at that.
That's the public water supply, though, not
Yes.
the water supply at 14 Loading Place Road.
Well, but you asked how we happened to pick this.
Right.
Just that it came up on the list as one of the oldest ones that hadn't been reviewed.
The private well regulation, I believe, was 1989.
So we're
And
just going
we just want to make sure it
chronologically.
was updated, and we asked the DEP for their comments and recommendations. As I think you pointed out, that a lot of what they sent to us, we incorporated into an existing regulation as an amendment.
And made it tougher.
Well, we can certainly consider all of your comments, and I'm sorry.
What are the metrics around, the town must know how much water, and I apologize because I have not read through all this stuff. I read and write all day, and I just haven't had a chance to sit down and read all this stuff, and I apologize if it's public knowledge, but the town as a whole, how much water does it use for drinking and irrigation? And then my question would be, how many wells are there in the town? I heard a number of 108 wells, is that accurate?
No, we have no idea.
We have no idea.
There's like 50-something. They're
60, I think.
Those are the ones that are noted in the state
private,
Yeah.
right.
database,
But
right?
that's not
Which
updated.
only goes back to, I think, 84.
Okay. So if we're talking about 60 wells, right, out of a town of how many thousand people,
5.
right? Like, what are we talking about here? It's like, you know, my well breaks down, I pay $3,000 for Mr. Rollins' to find people to come over and fix it. You know, the town doesn't pay that. You know, I pay for the H2O people to come to my house. Town doesn't pay for that. You know, and it just seems like now we're going to pay for more testing, this PFAS test and the radon test. So I can tell you, like, and referencing Mr. Hahn, who's referencing national studies, like, how many studies has the CDC done in Manchester, right? Or the Department of
Excuse me,
Environmental.
I'm not just referencing,
Excuse me, I'm
national
speaking.
studies.
I am speaking. And how many of the
Yeah.
Department of Environmental Protection have they done in Manchester or Cape Ann? You know, you want to start testing for radon? All of Cape Ann has radon, all of it. So is that going to disqualify our well? All of the wells have iron in them, excessive amounts of iron. Is my well going to be considered contaminated because it has iron in it? I mean, really, like,
Okay, this
have you guys done your homework about the water here? Seems like you haven't. You know,
This is Martin Hahn again.
No.
the exact water that comes out of the
Okay.
ground.
Number
in
one, we
Manchester.
don't-
You have to
Do
stop
it.
it? Thanks.
Mr.
On
Chair.
Loading Place Road, where I live, where I've lived for 25 years and never had a problem with my water. I live next to a very large home that draws a lot of water. I've never had a problem with my water. You know, it just seems like you guys haven't, like, and I respect the fact, the service to the town. I don't want to be disrespectful to you. I know you take time out of your personal lives to do this. But it's like, stop beating up on the little guy. Like, what are we talking about here? 50 wells? Really? I mean, come on. Come on.
Chair Colarusso, are you going to take comments from the Zoom audience as well?
Mark?
Yes, we will. We're trying to get through those who are in the room. If we could have hands raised on the Zoom, so that allows us to see who is interested in speaking there. Mr. Gang, we will absolutely give you time to comment.
Anybody else in the room that has a comment that's not repetitive, please?
Eli Bowling on 99 Pleasant Street. A couple of specific points. Most of the other people have covered all of them already, but
Excuse me, could you speak up a bit?
sure,
Thank you.
do my best. So, in section 8, water testing, quality testing requirements, there are two paragraphs that drew my attention. The first was paragraph 12, which may have also contributed to the notion that the board was going to be requiring chlorination. And that one says, regulation requires private drinking water meet all current Massachusetts primary and secondary drinking, et cetera, et cetera. And down at the bottom it says, as it deems necessary for the protection of public health, safety, or welfare, that the board may take action, but not limited to requiring the property owner provide remediation with a water treatment system or an alternative source of drinking water. So I'd just bring that up to suggest that that might be another source of people perceiving that the board is going to be requiring chlorination or other mitigation efforts.
I mean,
And then the other point that I was going to raise is in the same section in paragraph 7. It says the owner of rental property shall make results of all water quality tests available to all tenants of the property and the Board of Health. I don't really necessarily have a problem with that. However, it says in cases where the well water does not meet the water quality standards I outlined above, the Board of Health may require the property owner to provide an alternative approved source of drinking water for the tenants. So that's a little bit different from 7, where you said the board would potentially require treatment. In the case of the rental properties, it's excluding the possibility of treatment.
that's not the intent.
What's that?
That's not the intent.
I'm just, public hearing, I'm providing that feedback to you that I suggest that those two are potentially inconsistent. And possibly a source of concern for residents and rental owners. And then lastly, Mr. Beatty had suggested the addition of a section 13, which discussed not allowing chlorination, and I'll just observe that that would be potentially in conflict with section 12. That's my comments for now. Everybody else has already said the other things I would cover.
Thank you. I think I saw a hand up in the back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jay Buffett, Boardman Ave. I echo a lot of the comments here. I would just note that I think that bundling irrigation water with drinking water is a mistake. I think that there are lots of reasons why the Board of Health should be very interested in drinking water, and I do think that you can distinguish between irrigation wells and other wells where people are using for drinking water. And should.
Thank you. We have one, is Steve the only one on the,
Currently, he is the only one with his hand raised.
all right, Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the risk of being a little repetitive, I want to return to Alan Wilson's good point that imposing public water supply drought restrictions on private irrigation wells will frustrate the recommendations of the Water Resource Protection Task Force, which were to encourage private irrigation wells. This is a particular concern, not so much during drought periods, although I would rely on a specialized geohydrologist rather than general scientists such as Dr. Hahn to specify the location and interaction of the aquifers that feed private wells, as well as the Lincoln Street well and the groundwater sources that feed the Gravelly Pond Reservoir. But this will discourage people from drilling or using private wells during periods when water is ample. And that's a big problem if one of our goals is to conserve drinking water generally and to make sure that we have enough for the coming decades. It's also difficult for me to see, as I think you've mentioned, Mr. Chairman, it's difficult for me to see the connection between the quantity of water withdrawn from private irrigation wells and public health issues. So I think at the minimum we should try to clarify that connection. And let me therefore add my voice to those recommending that you postpone enacting these regulations in order to consider them further and to collect some more information. Particularly, I'd point you toward looking at comparables from similar towns, of which there are many in Massachusetts, some of them nearby, some of them not, so that you can be free of the debate about whether random samples of Massachusetts or samples from the Ogallala aquifer in the Midwest are pertinent, which obviously they aren't. So finally, can I just make a modest process suggestion? I make this with a lot of respect for the time and energy that all of you are putting into this as volunteers. And that is, when you hold a public hearing, you might take the public comment and not feel obliged to answer each comment. It's sufficient to say, we hear you, we understand, and we'll think about that. You'll find it goes a lot faster if you do that, and it might actually be a more pleasant process. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Dave, we have to be here all night, everyone else does too. So, are there any other comments? And if not, and you think of something on the way home, I would ask you to send a written statement in, and we will definitely consider everything that's been said today. We have questions
This is
ourselves.
Martin again. This is Martin. I'm essentially out of juice. I have to sign off. Sorry. No more battery.
All right, we
Okay.
still have
Thank
a
you.
quorum.
Thank you for everybody. Thank you.
We still have a quorum, so we're all right.
So there are two people in the audience who wanted to speak.
Just briefly, one thing I don't think was mentioned was the penalties. The penalties of $50 per day to $500 a day seem to be completely out of line with any other penalties in the town and seem very onerous. And I'm not even sure it's clear when and if those penalties would ever be charged for whatever action or non-action.
Another.
Do you have, have you done quality testing on that Lincoln Street well? Have you done,
No, the town does.
the town has? So can
Do
we
they
get the
report it?
data from that?
They report it to us.
So if you go on the state website, you
Yeah.
can go and see the consumer confidence report. You would go to DPW's, the Public Works Department, I think it's under water, water department, so
Okay,
they will have that
And
information.
it's Gravelly Pond also.
oh, okay.
The reason that she brought that up is, like I told you, my son's a professional, right? And he says that if you have a report that shows what you have in that well, right? Like PFAS, all these other things that are in the well, right? So if you have wells nearby that are matching what you have in that well, that means that those wells nearby could be drawing from that aquifer. But if other wells are not showing any of those things, right, that means that these other wells have nothing to do with that well. Okay, and
That
that
makes
makes
sense.
sense,
Yeah.
Right.
right? There's also tests that you can do, right, through USGS that will tell you the age of your water, right? Because water from the surface is a lot different than water that's in the ground. Water from the surface is more than likely affected by acid rain. So we get iron in the water from acid rain, right? So where I am on Crooked Lane, my iron level is very low, right? It's 0.1 or 0.01 or something, right? So that means that my water is not affected by acid rain, right? But there's other wells in town that could be, which show a whole different source, right? So I just wanted to let you know that. And
No,
that's
I
something
appreciate
that could be looked at in the future.
We intend to look at each case individually.
Okay.
Right? And if your report that you get annually shows that you're below the state, fine. Have a nice life. See you in 10 years. Each one is different. And if there are, like we do with the septic, if there are situations that cannot be reasonably addressed, then you can ask for a variance. And then we can work out a compromise deal. Right, so.
Just a brief comment. Albert Stagg, 19 University Lane. I live up the road from David. And I think he didn't mention one of his other options, which was to ignore the water ban. Right? There was a water ban, and he and his wife toted water for a whole season. And they decided they didn't want to be the kind of people who break a water ban, so they invested in a well. I remember reading a Cricket front page article about water usage and the top 10 users. There are a lot of people not obeying the water bans.
Well,
We don't
And
comment
I'm
on
not
that.
advocating that, but I just I'm getting a sense that, like, there's an overarching tone that, oh, these wealthy well owners are greedy and they're taking their water. And it's like, well, we built a well exactly because of that. Our plants were failing. We just moved here 2 years ago. We got hit with a drought right away. And we didn't want to be the kind of people who come to a new town and break the water bans. So we invested in a well. We got George over. And it was expensive. So, it's...
We have a lot of
Yeah.
questions in the committee, between the committee members,
Right.
whether the volume of water you use has anything to do with us,
There you go.
which would then eliminate all concerns about aquifers, connected, unconnected, uphill, downhill. Who cares? It's not our problem.
He suggested you don't have to respond.
Well, I wanted to
No, it's
minimize the future. One last comment.
Yeah, hi, sorry, Paul Murray again. I just wanted, it's shocking to me, and I don't know if this number is true or not, but if there's 50 wells, drinking water wells, is that the number that was thrown out, 50?
Oh, 50 something.
There is no confirmed number.
It's way higher.
So-
Way higher.
It's way higher.
It's way higher?
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Because I was gonna say 24 of them are on Loading Place Road, and that would represent.
The reason
They're still in the
50 came
town.
out is because that's what was,
Massachusetts.
the state of Massachusetts has a record
And
of
you just
50
haven't
of them.
reported to them.
No, well, we weren't the ones to report, but if they were historically here, so before 1984, and that's not historical for a lot of us, thanks, but those aren't listed anywhere. Maybe we will have a well completion report. George was very good at getting, Rollins Company is very good at turning in paperwork. There's some well companies that don't. and maybe it's in the file, maybe it's not, but there are a lot more. But again, this is information we're gonna go find.
Right.
I've been here a really long time. I'm gonna guess at a number of about 120 to 140.
And we're not sure they're all operational.
Right.
That would still put a big chunk of them on Loading Place Road. In one place.
Yeah, I think just this, Motorola University Lane, I actually live between these two guys. Just one more comment. I know
Is that why you're sitting there
I-
between?
I would be very curious. I use a well for irrigation and water. When I built my house, the town would not connect me to the
Your
well.
drinking water.
Drinking. So it would be interesting to see how many wells are drinking and how many are irrigation. Because it's two completely different categories we're talking about here. I pay to have my water purified so I can drink it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What I send out to the plants, I'm not gonna send the most expensive purified water to my plants. And I think the people here that are doing most of the irrigation, they don't wanna spend thousands of dollars for purified water to water their tomatoes. That's all I'm saying.
I believe the last comment, Eli.
No.
Give it up while you're ahead, huh? I'd like to have a motion to close the public comments.
Also move, Joan.
It's just us. The others are all gone. The three of us. Aye. Aye.
Thank you.
We've heard you. We will take all of your comments into consideration, and we'll try to find a ground that everybody's happy with.
Thank
To close the public comment, you need to
Close the public
Make a
hearing.
motion to
continue. You
continue
need a
or
motion
close.
regarding the status of the public hearing. Are you continuing the public hearing
I
or
will move
closing the public hearing?
to continue the public hearing in due time.
Well, why don't you set the last date of February, which was 25th?
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
You can set it for the last February or
What's
first
our
one in
last
March?
meeting in February?
Isn't it the
Too
25th?
soon. First meeting in February is next week.
Last.
You can just keep continuing it. You can continue it to next meeting and keep continuing it.
Okay, continue to the next meeting.
You can do that.
Last
No, I'm not saying they can't.
Oh, okay.
The last meeting in February, which is what we're going to.
Why can't I say the last meeting in March?
You can make a
you can
motion,
make the motion.
make whatever motion you like.
Yeah, you can continue it in
Give it
August.
to me so I can write it down.
Yes.
I move
Thank
that
you,
we
everybody, for coming.
continue
If you
this.
have,
Having a meeting. Appreciate it.
if you have any questions or if you want any copies of anything, please send it in.
I absolutely will. I absolutely will. Everyone who I've communicated with, I will absolutely do that. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Yours as well. You made a.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
I was,
I will say, yeah, so what can I say, the end of June?
Yeah, it's something. As soon as they.
I would say, why don't we put this off for?
Hey, everyone, we still have some agenda items that we need to get through.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
We're still in a public meeting, though.
Yeah.
We have a motion to close the public, to continue. We already had that, right? Oh, you have to give the
It
date.
hasn't been acted on, and she is going to amend it, I believe.
I would like to amend it to continue this to the last meeting in June.
George, nice to see you.
I suppose no.
All right, then the last meeting in March. Is that all right?
Okay.
I don't think I did.
Roll call vote. Roll
Yeah.
call
Yeah,
vote.
they.
Joan, aye.
Peter, aye.
Yeah, inside my house. Yeah.
Hey, guys, we gotta continue our meeting.
Yeah. We're still in our open meeting, so if you want to discuss, if you could just go out in the hallway, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Even though I
Thank you so
disagree
much.
with much of what's in this regulations, I appreciate the work.
Oh, well,
Thank you. Yeah,
you
thank
know,
you. Thank you.
we appreciate the work you put in. We're
Yeah.
modeling after you.
I'm not here with that hat on.
No, I know.
Jacket, Alan?
I think maybe Mr. Stegg.
Mr. Stegg, still out
Good
there?
night.
Good night.
Thank you, you too.
Oh, there you go, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Martin,
Right, how are you?
it's hard to call us.
Who seconded the motion?
I did.
Thank you.
Did he get my good side, Wendy?
I think he did. Still getting a good side.
I'll tell him I'll give him a bonus if he got my good side, but he told me I'd have to
He
stand
still
up.
has your good side, and we still have about 5 people on the phone.
Okay.
Do they want to speak to this issue?
I don't know, did anybody on Zoom have any comments right now?
There's something in the chat.
It's not.
My eye's not that good.
Down at to the left there of the green square.
Yeah, it's, somebody said it's us directly versus. Pardon me.
Can you read it?
Will you be taking public comment from Zoom attendees like
Oh,
me?
he's
That was
spelled.
one.
He's
Thank you
spelled.
all, thank you, Susie.
Okay. Is that the only person on Zoom, right? So there is no public comment on non-agenda items, because there is no public.
Doesn't seem so.
So we can move on to your report.
Oh, we are there already, huh? Woo-hoo. So,
Well, that was certainly interesting.
was anybody pointed out my
The
agenda?
issue is people who spent money to put in wells.
You need a copy? I have a copy.
Of my report?
Do you want a copy?
Please.
I have a
Oh,
copy.
she's got it up, thank you. I'm sorry, this is the second time I haven't printed out my own report.
No, that's.
You good? Or you
Yeah,
want
can you
this?
pass that down? Oh, I'm sorry.
I can.
Thank you, Ellen. All right, so, the brochures, I definitely should not have been so anxious to get them here for tonight. I went to Staples and we did purchase them, but next time we are going through Tiffany and the town, so, hopefully they will be done by Monday or Tuesday. I'll pick them up and I'll make sure, that we have them for our next meeting.
Well, we have plenty of time. When is that welcoming committee thingy?
I don't know if they've reset it, what is it? It
So-
was supposed to be spring.
Spring.
Yeah, so we have plenty of time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'd like to get it out for people. But
No, it's fine.
so the education project, we have requested APHC to help. They are getting a project scope together and are enthusiastic. They already have a lot from other communities, especially regarding PFAS and in general, water protection. Grease traps, we have been collecting data about the grease traps. The Cala's restaurant, remember back in August, they said they were they were having issues. They did send in a plan. It's on the plumbing inspector's desk for review. We get a copy of it because they're a restaurant and they're a licensed facility, but it is within the plumbing inspector's purview to approve. They did actually accept my request that they keep it as 1,000 gallons versus the smaller 500 one.
Okay, good.
I think Cala's has enough volume to
Oh, yeah.
reasonably ask for that, and they agreed. Opioid settlement funds. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the opioid settlement funds that each town is getting in Massachusetts. We are starting out with about a bulk 8,000, and that's all the smaller folks paying it. And then the longer term ones from like CVS or not CVS, I don't forget the two names of the companies that sold the opioids. But anyways, they're going to be paying out about $1,500 a year until 2038.
Oh, God.
So they just, incrementally, I guess. So there's a lot that we can potentially do with this. The town, I don't know if you've read through it, but the town was looking already at Nalox boxes, and that's like having a Narcan kit.
Yep.
And they want to combine it with Stop the Bleed, allergen, and the AED So that it'll be like a large box that has these units and people
How
can,
much Narcan would be in it, for how many patients?
just one, and it would be, well, one or two, but the one box.
Yeah, okay.
Right, and it would be our or somebody's responsibility. When I say our, I mean fire, police, and health, and it will probably end up being fire. That goes around and just makes sure that they're filled.
And how much does each box cost, do you know?
So that's some of the information we're looking at. The police chief said somewhere around $400 or $500 for a watertight box, and the Stop the Bleed and the allergen Narcan kits are free. AEDs are a separate item.
Do you have any idea of how many boxes they're gonna be looking for?
Currently, they're looking at one downstairs, one at the at the fire station. School has a couple and has asked for a couple more. I believe they wanted one down at the park, the Masconomo Park. I suggested the library and the beach, and they were gonna say they were gonna put something at the beach, the highway department. And so we're, if you think of places and other places that might be appropriate, definitely speak up and I'll let them know.
Well, I think the beach, Black Beach or whatever down there, because that's at a distance from the other ones.
Right, and that's unmonitored, but maybe over at the Bath and Tennis or something
Yes.
like that.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Seems like maybe having more than one thing of Narcan in each one, because I feel like if there's a group of people and one person
Right.
has overdosed, it could be like a situation where you need more Narcan kits, I don't know, if those are free.
Yeah, and so one of the questions I had was, will you give me permission to apply to be an affiliate for the Community Naloxone program?
Yes.
What is that?
What is that?
So the state has a naloxone program where you can get the kits and naloxone and boxes for free. It also sets us up as an affiliate to the program so that if there's things that also come down the road, say like fentanyl test strips or funding, or you don't know, but you're a part of the program. You're
notified of it.
Yes, and that allows us to be there. So it's not much of a responsibility on our part, but it does allow us to be in the right place at the right time.
Is there a limit on how many Narcan kits we can get, or is it on demand?
On demand, and I
would think the restaurants might be interested in having one.
So Essex has had some interest from restaurants.
Yeah.
And I was hoping to talk to Dunkin' Donuts once we
I
were.
would say, not just the restaurants, but the beach club and,
The one on Singing Beach?
Right.
Yes.
And I was thinking the train station, but that's talking to the MBTA.
Oh, golf
Maybe.
course, maybe, the
Right.
golf club.
So all of these places are things that we definitely want to talk about. And there isn't a limit on the number. Or let me rephrase that. There is no way we're gonna hit the limit in our little town when they're also supplying places like Worcester and, bigger cities.
How do people access the locked boxes?
And I call them lock boxes and they're not actually
They're not.
locked. They're, you open it up.
So could someone be I don't know, like if people steal any of these things.
I don't know if that is really an issue as far as when you would have like an individual item out there. You don't put it out in the middle of nowhere.
I mean, they're free, so there's no resale value if you steal it.
Yeah.
And that would be something that we'd talk to the police chief about it. I'm sure he would keep his eye on it. Officers driving around.
Wouldn't be cheap.
No.
Huh?
I don't know if AEDs are going to be, sent out into the.
Yeah, but
Easily accessible, yeah.
they have to be easily accessible. From what I understand, they're
AEDs
fairly easy to use, the instructions.
Yeah.
Right.
They
But
tell you what to do.
those would not be, at the beach or something like that. They would be,
Well, the lifeguards probably have one. I think there is one there.
They're at the beach, but they're in
Yeah.
the bathhouse, so there's obviously supervision, oversight.
yes,
At the
oversight,
bathhouse,
yes.
And I think the sports clubs are now required to have, like the football
Oh.
team, is required to have one on the bench.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they should.
And somebody suggested putting, at least some of the, like Stop the Bleed or an AED in the buses for the seniors. So,
Do we need any training to go along with this? How do you-
not that I know of,
Yeah.
but again, I just asked if I could, oh, you mean training for the naloxone?
Right,
So
right.
the police department, actually, so us joining the community naloxone program as an affiliate, the police department have a $10,000 grant from One Stop, and I believe the fire chief is working on the AED boxes. So and with the opioid funding, we're trying to come together and use it in a way that's, helpful and spreads it across. So education is one of the things. Definitely can get training on the naloxone. I would love to have a Stop the Bleed training, that kind of thing. So that's sort of like our conversations.
Yeah,
But I didn't want to get too far into it because the board has expressed that they would like to be informed before I actually act.
Yeah, I would make a motion to go ahead and become an affiliate.
Yeah, I second the motion.
John second.
So that's separate from everything else?
Yeah.
That's separate from the the Narcan boxes?
Right.
You're talking about two separate things, but your
Right.
motion is about
Joining.
the
An
second,
affiliate
the
for
second.
Community,
Okay.
naloxone program.
And
Yes.
if we can get good PR being involved with that, I think that would go a long way.
Yes. Well, hopefully we'll be able to put some trainings together with the police department and fire department and, really be able to provide the community with some, healthy help when it comes to this. We'll see how it goes.
You have a
Good
motion
conversation.
on the table?
So I second.
Leah, aye.
Joan,
Peter,
I move we move along because
we have one more
pretty
item.
soon it'll be past my bedtime.
One more thing is, we have
Minutes.
No, the emergency response team.
So MEMA training happened. I'm sorry that nobody else was able to make it. Ellen did come, so hopefully that was a good experience. We both had a good experience there. Definitely want to involve the board members in becoming a part of the emergency response if you have the capacity. We are running a drill to set up the shelter at the school on March 16th, which is a Saturday. Would definitely like to provide information along with some other related work in a working session for the board. If you would, at your discretion, decide a time. In the face of the fact we need to be working on the well regulations too. I don't know if it would be appropriate to find a time to sort of meet outside of your regular schedule or in addition, but that's can be something you think through and talk about next time.
I don't seem to have my phone, so I can check, but I don't have any plans to go anywhere.
February 8th is our regular meeting at 8:30 in the morning.
So what, you figure on tagging it along?
If you want me to tag along with that, certainly.
That might be the easiest to coordinate. Trying to get 5 people to have matching schedules may be a trick.
Okay. Somebody's on the phone? Is that your
I hit the wrong button.
Oh.
Yeah, the February 25th meeting, I know I won't be here.
Okay.
School vacation week.
You going on vacation?
We will not.
So then on the 8th, I'll do a short information, emergency management presentation for you all.
Okay.
March 16th. That's a Saturday.
Somehow I thought the MEMA training had been rescheduled, so I've done.
Yeah, I think I'm all set. I think I'm clear on that.
Oh, great. That'll be great to see you. And hopefully we'll get to work with the MRC you'll get to meet Lisa Jackson, who's an amazing person working with us as the MRC coordinator. So that was all for me.
Okay. Last item. Minutes of January 11th. Has everybody had a chance to read it? Read them.
Was there only one set of minutes or two? Let's do both
January
of them.
11th.
One, just one.
Okay. I move we accept the minutes as written.
I'll second the motion.
Go ahead, vote.
Oh, aye, Joan.
Leah, aye.
Peter, aye. All right, the meeting summary, can I ask of you two things? Recommendation on how we proceed moving the well regulation along,
Okay.
number one. And then number two, I think the next thing was Title V.
Yes.
Could you, maybe this is impossible, I don't know, but I think you said there were 5 separate documents relating to Title V. Can you,
Regarding what?
Title V.
Oh.
Can you just give us a title in like 3 sentences of what that document is or
Can
addresses?
I have 5 to 10 sentences?
Yeah, but we don't need. we
No,
don't
I
need
won't
a
go, I
detail.
won't go paragraph by
Yeah,
paragraph,
we
but
don't
can I
need
have a whole
detail.
paragraph to tell you what each document is?
No, that's fine.
Okay, you
And
said
then-
3 sentences, I take you seriously.
And then anything that is recent that we should be aware of as a Title V regulation.
Okay.
That it's not in the 5 documents. We might as well get everything done at once.
Yes.
You set that on your long-term schedule for the end of summer, like fall,
Right.
at the
to
last
have
meeting.
Something.
So you're just looking for something in between.
Well,
Yeah.
I want
Because
to know,
you gave Wendy until the fall.
no, I just want to know how
Yeah.
long it's going to take, how much is involved. I mean, there's not going to be a lot of people that are going to be available to contribute in the summer, I don't think.
Right, you wouldn't want to vote on it before
Oh,
you had everybody.
Voting, I'm not talking about voting, I'm talking about composing. and getting
I think you gave her, though, at the last meeting, you gave her until August or September to give you a packet. I'm not talking about the mini packet you're talking about. I'm talking about you gave her a long date, out. She has to for 6 months, and you said yes.
Right, to pick out and pull together something that,
Mhm.
to get,
Yeah.
to shake the, what is it, the chaff from the wheat.
And I think at that time, there was a question whether whether it would help to have a study group, a work group, whatever the heck you
Yes,
call it.
I've been asking for a work group with,
So, I think it'd be easy to get volunteers if they knew what they were volunteering for. Maybe it'd be
Really, I
harder,
don't-
maybe it'd be harder, you
it might be
never know.
harder, it might be harder, haha, no,
So that's the
good.
reason for the summary, to try to understand
Yes,
how this all fits in. You're gonna be busy with your inspections in the spring.
yes, but that's okay, we will work on it, and if I don't get it done, I will let you know where I am at it. But you're asking for that separate document with the Title V updates and the paragraph summary, a document with the summary for the 5 documents. Next meeting, or is that right?
Can you do it by then, or do you need
I
2
will,
weeks?
you know what, I will just say I can try,
Alright.
I will try. It's
Alright.
2 weeks and we'll see what goes on.
And in terms of the wells, we'll talk about it more.
But, yeah, we need to figure out the best way to.
So he asked me for the recommendation on how to proceed moving the well
the best way to
regulations along.
address those issues.
Right, so I will produce, just a document saying, well, you should do working groups maybe, or just options and thoughts about how you,
I know,
next step from here.
I think Martin may be
It's okay.
difficult to get on the team.
Well, it might be hard to, timing wise, I know that he's often
I
traveling.
have a question. If that gentleman has done 80% of the wells in Manchester, then he's obviously reliable, and I wonder if we should ask him to consult with a small group as to
Yeah.
what he sees are some of the issues that would help move us along. Like I personally are against requiring people to stop watering if they have wells when there is a watering ban.
We're starting to talk
So you
about.
can't
I'm saying
discuss,
we
because you
can't-
closed the discussion, you can mention, could everybody think about including George Rollins in the future? That's okay, but you can't have any further
Can I ask
discussion.
that if his well company, when they drill, like, do they test water or do they just do the drill? Like, are they
They
involved in
drill
testing?
and they're affiliated with the testing company. There were two gentlemen sitting next to him who own the testing company that he refers his clients to.
So he drills the well.
He's
and
the
then-
driller.
And then the H2 or whatever those, they do the
So there's a
testing.
driller, there's usually a separate person that puts in pumps and a separate company that tests the water.
Yes.
So we
Yeah,
could use
maybe
the
we could-
first and the third.
I think we should get the testing people involved as well.
That seems to be a big issue.
And so we know the cost, like I don't want
I
to,
did have some information on that, but I just,
Sorry.
but again, we're not talking about
No,
that because
no.
we're outside of that.
Yes.
We can put into a meeting, and we're gonna talk about wells, that'll be on the next agenda, that we're gonna, recommendations on how to proceed. And again, we won't be able to talk about the specifics because we do need to have another meeting and announce that we're going to
That open.
maybe, and opening for comment
But
again.
ask maybe for input from.
Yes, yeah, and that would be something that's also listed on my recommendations. In 2 weeks, we'll have a list and it'll include, get expertise from, the driller, George Rollins, do we wanna talk to, testing facilities? There's H2O. I know, there's several companies, I'm trying to think, BioMarine, there's several companies that do testing, and, would they be willing to consult? Or, again, we also have to think money, when you ask somebody to officially consult, that costs money, so.
You say advise.
Advice, there we go, that's the word we're looking for, advice.
That's cheaper.
And what about, are we gonna have to pay for their time to come to a meeting?
I do not know, I have no idea. It's
Well-
not something I've asked before. George came
I
as
I'd be surprised with George. I think George is, but I don't know. But
Well, I
I think
asked him
he's
10
I
years
think he's
ago and
an
he said no.
I think he's an information sharer, and that's what he was interested in doing, was
Yeah.
sharing with you what his years in the field and
Yeah,
and installing here
right.
I mean, even,
garnered knowledge from.
even if we came up with some questions, for instance, for the test firm.
You know what,
Say, what's your find, how many tests have you done in town? What are your findings?
right?
Maybe not specific, because that might be confidential, but how many meet the regulations, how many don't?
So you know what would be useful for me for next time is if anybody has like ideas, you want George Rollins, you want, questions, if you could email them to me and that way I can incorporate them into like here's our options for
Workshop,
going,
yeah.
that would be helpful.
Email them to you.
Yeah, that's the
think-
best way.
And, I know, Alan, you've been working on, figuring out all the didn't you say before COVID, you had started to do things?
That was Title
That was-
V.
That was
Title
Title
V.
V, but
I don't know, I don't know if there's data, could I be a volunteer to try and, if I.
so
had
the new
access to
wells
that?
all are in the online permitting
ones, but
systems.
only
The new
from-
ones from like 18 or
we have
19 forward,
information.
and then there's a list of
From 18
of,
to
of,
2018.
st- of, there's a list of a historic list of wells, but the question is, did they keep them when the town water went down their road?
Right.
Did they keep it for irrigation? Did they keep it for drinking water? Did they,
Does the town have that?
well, we know who's receiving town water, and I know who historically had wells. But the question is, if some of the people on Loading Place Road, for instance, when the water went down there, did they hook up to the water and keep their well? Did they decommission their well? Did they choose to use their well for watering only?
Okay.
So there's just a lot of information. If you want to volunteer and start piecing out what we need to know, go on the state website and pull some of that information together. And like Joan is working on our septic information that we're gonna be uploading. I mean, we can certainly find.
There's plenty to do.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
And if you wanna start that process, that'd be great, but I think that's a conversation, maybe if you wanted to come in and volunteer, we can sort of talk about what would be most useful
mhm.
and do that. I don't think it's a good idea to do it at 8 o'clock at night. I can see
No,
Joan
no.
fading.
Yeah.
I'm about to say,
Okay.
Minutes. Minutes.
They did
I
them.
think we already.
Oh, you did
They
them.
did them.
Summary is, I am applying for the Community Naloxone Program. I'm presenting emergency preparedness to the board at the next meeting. It's gonna be smaller than I was thinking, but that's okay because incrementally. And give you a recommendation on how we proceed with the wells regulations. And I'm going to try for the document summary for Title V. Was there anything I missed?
What was the second one on emergency?
I'm sorry, I was.
Apply for community
Community
naloxone
naloxone
program. Well
present-
recommendations, Title V, start.
And then
What was the
present-
emergency?
just present emergency preparedness to the board, so give them an idea of what it is, what we're doing, to sort of prepare them for the
Participation.
participation. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, great, I get to turn
I
off.
move we terminate.
Terminate.
I move we end the meeting.
7:54.
I second it too.
I don't think you can do that.
Who's
I'll
second?
second, I'll
Okay.
second.
Well, I think we can have Joan
Roll call vote?
as a yes.
You know, there's
Roll
Can we
call
just,
vote?
can you just vote?
there's a
Yeah.
limit to just
Peter, I.